Remember that today's experience, entitled Creating and Launching Choice Boards with Nearpod, we're going to have an opportunity to work side by side with each other. Whether we decide to create a choice board in Nearpod, using Google Slides, or PowerPoint, I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how we can create those experiences, bring them into Nearpod in order to differentiate or create various learning pathways for our students. Really excited to show you some of the tips that I personally use in the classroom, and I can't wait for you to use them as well this year as we start another fantastic academic year with Nearpod. Like I mentioned, my name is Phil Wagner, and I am a state consultant on the customer education team. I have over 18 years of experience in public, private, and higher education. I am an international and national speaker, joining you today from Atlanta, Georgia. So for all of my East Coast friends, it is so great to be with you. But whether you are participating here in the United States or all around the world, I'm so excited for you to join my session and for us to learn how to create choice boards so that we can support every learner with Nearpod. Before we begin today's session, I would like to encourage everyone to utilize the Nearpod Notes feature. If you toggle over to your student tab or window, you'll see waiting for you in the lower right corner of your window is an icon that says My Notes. If you select this icon, you will then have the opportunity to choose your save location. Now, keep in mind that I will be providing a preview link to today's presentation, which will give you access to today's experience. However, you might want to write down some of the amazing connections or instructional strategies that I will be sharing as we look and certainly learn how can we use choice boards to help support every learner. In these moments, you can take notes alongside the Nearpod presentation, and once I end today's session, it will then be sent to your save location. I'm going to hold here for about 10 seconds just to give you that opportunity to go ahead and save your notes before we continue. Remember, for those of us that are just joining, hello and welcome everyone. It's great to have you here today. My name is Phil Wagner, and I'm a state consultant on the customer education team here at Renaissance. And I want to welcome you today to creating choice boards with Nearpod. You'll notice that there is a clickable link and lesson code that will be constantly posted within the chat field. Feel free to join us. Remember, any questions that you have about today's session, go ahead and post them in the Q&A chat field so that both Valerie and myself can review the question and provide you with a response. Now that you've had an opportunity to activate your Nearpod notes, let's come back to my shared screen here in Zoom so that we can begin our session together. As you return back to my shared screen, I would like to share our mission here at Renaissance, which has remained the same since 1986. And that is to accelerate learning for all children and adults of all ability levels and ethnic and social backgrounds worldwide. Now, in today's experience, you'll discover that we have the opportunity to learn first, how can we create choice boards in Nearpod using Nearpod slides? We'll take a moment to show some tips and tricks on how we can best utilize that. Also, we can learn how to create choice boards with Google Slides as well as PowerPoint and then add it into Nearpod. Finally, I'll also share how we can link student-paced Nearpod lessons and activities to differentiate support for our students. We have lots to learn today, and I'm really excited to show you some of these tips. As we continue our conversation, I wanted to share an essential question, one that I hope that we're able to answer at the end of today's experience. And it states this: how can you use Nearpod to deliver differentiated learning pathways with digital choice boards and hyperdocs? One of the questions that I get asked a lot is, well, I have students who are on varying levels of learning. Can I create different learning pathways in Nearpod? And what's the easiest way to do it? That's precisely what we're going to talk about here today, is how can we create those differentiated pathways in order to meet the learning needs of every learner within our classroom. Before we begin to learn how to create the different choice boards, often it's important to establish the why. What might be different reasons why we're creating choice boards within our classroom? Well, one is we might want to differentiate learning. Like I said, is that we have learners that we need to support that range across a wide variety of learning needs. Sometimes we have students that might need more foundational access to content, and we might have others that are ready for a more rigorous or accelerated engagement. We can plan those experiences and create the level learning opportunities here in Nearpod. We also might want it to be more personalized for our students. Again, this could be to choose tasks to explore topics in depth, apply learning to real world situations, and take ownership of their learning. Again, providing more choice of how students want to engage in content. By doing this, this is going to increase engagement because students have more autonomy to choose how they can engage in the experience. Lastly, flexibility. Students can work at their own pace and teachers can provide targeted support. Again, that's the whole point of when we're looking at choice boards, is provide that learning opportunity for students to choose the right pathway and then ultimately for us to guide and support that learning journey. Before I begin, I would like to have you participate in a Nearpod poll. As you make your way over to your student participation tab or window, you'll see waiting for you is the following question. How would you like to incorporate putting a choice board in Nearpod into your instruction? Now notice that you have different options. A, as a standalone lesson with one slide. B, as a follow-up to formative assessment in Nearpod, such as a quiz or matching pairs. C, as an option for students to choose a learning pathway within a lesson. Or D, as a way to quickly share assignment tasks to different groups of students. If we have already done so, let's toggle over and make our selection now. As you finish up your thought, I'm going to share the data for today. And it looks like for this particular group, about 40% of us are looking to create different choice boards as an option for my students to choose a learning pathway within a lesson. I'll keep that in mind as we're making our way through today's experience. However, there are about a quarter of us that might be looking to follow up to a formative assessment, and we have about 10% that's looking for just a standalone. Again, whether we're looking for a standalone experience or to complement the learning journey of our students, we're going to showcase how we can utilize all these different strategies when we are building a choice board within Nearpod, as well within Google Slides and PowerPoint. Let's begin that journey. As you toggle over to your student participation tab or window, I wanted you to participate in just one more drawed activity. And the question reads at the top, what might you adjust in Nearpod to provide choices for your learners? Highlight, underline, and annotate this slide to add your thoughts, responses, or things you're wondering about. Let's pause here and see how we can create opportunities for process, content, and product. As you're finishing up your thoughts, I want to say hello and welcome to everyone. It's so great to see you here today. Remember that if you would like to participate in today's experience, if you direct your attention towards the Zoom chat field, you will see a clickable link that will be posted throughout today's presentation. Go ahead and click the link to join today's experience. Remember, any questions that you have, go ahead and post them in the Q&A section of chat so that we can support you during today's presentation. As I bring everyone back to my shared screen here in Zoom, I want to mention that it's not uncommon for us to want everything. We want to create a choice board that helps support with the process, the content, and the product. But a good question is how? How do we do that? What are different strategies? What are different techniques? What does that look like? That's precisely what I want to support you with today, is I want to provide you with different examples as well as showing you how to very quickly and easily create choice boards where we have process, content, and product in mind. Like I said, I can't wait to show you these different techniques. So let's get started. For those of us that would like to follow along with me and practice building alongside me, let's take a moment to log in to our Nearpod account. Remember, in a separate tab or window, as I'm modeling for you here within our Nearpod page, you'll notice that I'm navigating to the main landing page of Nearpod. Remember that if we have a Nearpod account, we can click on Log In along the top. Here, we can sign in with our single sign-on, which now includes Apple. If you are brand new to Nearpod and don't quite have a teacher account yet, that's okay. You can click Sign Up for free and create your very own Nearpod account right now with a free silver account. Let me pause here and allow everyone to go ahead and log into Nearpod, have your teacher tab ready so that when we do toggle over and practice different skills, you're ready to go. Let me pause here for about 30 seconds, giving you that opportunity. Now that you've had an opportunity to log in to your Nearpod account or create a brand new Nearpod account for the very first time, let's keep that tab open, but let's toggle back to my shared screen here in Zoom so that we may all continue together. As you return back to my shared screen here in Zoom, I would like to first discuss how we can duplicate Nearpod lessons to differentiate. Oftentimes, when we understand certain Nearpod experiences for our students, is when we want to duplicate either a single activity or entire lesson, we want to modify that depth of knowledge question for certain students so that they have that right level of engagement. But what are some easy ways to do that? Do we have to create the entire lesson all over again? Do we have to build it all over? No. In fact, you'll see that there are some really quick and easy ways to not only duplicate the lesson, but also modify that depth of knowledge question so that you can very quickly adjust that level of engagement for students so that it's at their right level. Let's take a moment to look at this here together. You'll see that in the Nearpod presentation, we've arrived at a hyperdoc. Now, I'm going to scroll through this hyperdoc live with you. However, if on your student participation tab or window, if you wanted to click or scroll along with me, you're more than welcome to do so. If we're looking to duplicate any lesson with the intent of modifying the depth of knowledge question that is asked within any formative assessment activity, we're going to want to hover over that Nearpod lesson. And you'll discover that when we hover over the activity or lesson thumbnail, you will see 3 vertical dots. When selected, this will reveal the opportunity to duplicate this resource. When you click duplicate, you'll notice that we'll have the opportunity to then choose to create a copy of that lesson. Now, immediately, what's going to open up is the lesson editor window, very similar to what you see here. You'll notice that at the top, if we are adjusting the depth of knowledge for students, we may want to rename the title. For example, oftentimes I would use different colors, or I would relabel the lesson, maybe 1.1 or 1.2, depending upon the DOK level that is found within that Nearpod lesson. Also notice that along the left side, you will see that this is where you can have access to different Nearpod activities. Here you can double click, which will open up that activity, which you see here with Draw It, and you can, with the Collaborate board, and you can highlight and delete the text in order to adjust that depth of knowledge engagement for the students that we're looking to target with this duplicated lesson. Remember, once you're done, you can go ahead and click Save and Exit, and I'll show you a little bit later how we can get this experience to students. I also wanted to bring to your attention, before I do a live demonstration for you, what are the different ways that we can share lesson codes with your students? Now, we always have 2 different ways to go about it. We can have live participation and student paced. Now, oftentimes, teachers will automatically default to live participation. That's synchronous learning, or where teachers guide students from one slide to the next or from activity to activity. When we're deciding to use choice boards, on the other hand, we might decide to utilize student paced. Remember that student paced is an asynchronous learning experience of the very same Nearpod lesson or single activity. By utilizing the student pace mode, this will provide students with that opportunity to navigate through our lesson experience or duplicated tiered learning experience where they can not only engage in that lesson experience on their own, but also at their own pace. I wanted to share, of course, where this is located, and it's always found on My Lessons in the home page, where you can see the different lessons. Remember to hover over your lesson image thumbnail, like you see here, to find the Teach icon. And once selected, this is where you'll find the opportunity to select Student Paced. Now, I wanted to spend some time talking about some of the different options you'll have when utilizing student pace codes. Notice that I have those options listed over here to the right, but I want to take us to the next slide so that I can provide a more in-depth view. Now, when we are utilizing choice boards with our students, you may have noticed that you have the ability to use copy links. Remember that this is a great strategy for you to take that copy link and ultimately insert it into a Nearpod slide, or should you choose, you can also use the lesson code to have students manually type in the code as well. There are some additional features that you might decide to use when setting up a choice board with your students. Notice that you have the opportunity, unlike live participation, to adjust the length of time that a live participation lesson or single activity is accessible. You'll see that student pace by default is available for 30 days. However, you can limit access to this single resource to where it's just 24 hours or 1 day. You can also increase access to this lesson up to 1 calendar year. That's great, especially if we want to give students extended time or provide additional access to that resource. Also, you'll notice that near the bottom of the student paced code window, you'll see the ability to require student responses and prevent skipping. Oftentimes, I encourage teachers to turn this on, and what this will do is when students are participating in your asynchronous activity or lesson, they won't be able to move forward in the activity or lesson without answering and engaging in that activity. Remember, if this is not turned on, then they'll be able to navigate through the lesson without engaging in it. However, here, it'll prompt that response to remind students, hey, you forgot to post your ideas, you forgot to engage, and it will hold them until they provide a response. I wanted to bring your attention that the copy link is going to be really important when we are working with choice boards. Remember again that when we're working with a choice board, we oftentimes want to provide clickable access for students. Well, you might be wondering, how do we do that? After clicking on Student Paste, you'll see that we will then click on the copy link, and this is where we can paste this link into a Nearpod slide. We can also take this very same link and insert it into a Google Slide hyperdoc, or even a PowerPoint PDF, or even PowerPoint slide, which I'll have the opportunity to share with you here in just a moment. As we continue our learning, remember that should you have any questions whatsoever, to go ahead and post them to the Zoom question and answer field, and we'd be more than happy to answer any and all of your questions that you have. Before I transition to a demonstration live on the platform, I also wanted to share with you where we can grab a preview link. Now, keep in mind that a preview link will give you access to the resource, but the issue here is that it will not collect data. The benefit of a preview link is that it will never expire. Sometimes we just want to provide students access to content. For example, maybe we want to provide student practice while it's collecting data. If that is something you're looking forward to doing with your students, you can utilize a preview link, and here you can insert it into your Nearpod slide, Google Slide hyperdoc, or PowerPoint, which we can bring into Nearpod in order to give students seamless access to that resource without having to log in. However, remember that since they're not logging in, we also don't have the ability to collect data. As I pause here, I wanted to provide a live demonstration on my screen and then ultimately give you the opportunity to try it as well. If you stay with me, or if you would like to practice along with me, I'm going to navigate to my Nearpod account tab. You'll notice, just like you, that when you arrive back in Nearpod, we're going to create a brand new lesson in Nearpod. You'll see that as we're looking at the brand new lesson, remember that the goal here ultimately is to get those lesson links into a brand new lesson, but we're not quite there yet. If we bring our attention down to those lessons or resources that we already have, remember that the first step in creating those differentiated learning experiences is to duplicate and to modify what would be those depth of knowledge questions that are found within each one of the lesson activities. I'm going to use a sample lesson that I've made a copy from the Nearpod library. You'll see that as I hover over that lesson, I can click the 3 vertical dots in the upper right corner, and remember we're going to choose duplicate. Now let's pretend that this resource came from the Nearpod library and I intend to use it for my students that are rising towards mastery. But I might need to adjust this lesson for my students that are at the foundational level or just starting with the skill. Notice that I can make that adjustment at the top, or I might decide to make this 1.1 so that I know that the types of questions that I'm asking are for that entry level of students. As I'm scrolling down to the different activities, and like I said before, is that as I make my way to the different content and activity features, I might decide to adjust the depth of knowledge level for my students. Now remember, depending upon the content and the skill, we can make that adjustment. And if we click off or continue with our adjustment in the lesson, remember that it automatically saves. As I return back to my main teacher page, I also wanted to share with you how we can launch different Nearpod resources, whether they're single lessons or if they're individual activities as student-paced. Remember that if you hover over that particular resource and click Teach, you'll see that we have both options. One, we have live participation and student-paced. Remember that if we're looking to create choice boards, we're probably going to want to use student-paced. Here, when selected, remember if we would like to change the amount of time that the lesson is accessible, we can click on the 29 days remaining, and remember that we can minimize access to that asynchronous lesson, or we can increase or add time to that lesson, like I'm demonstrating here for you. Make sure you click Apply Changes, and once you've done this, you can click to copy a link. And don't forget to make sure that you require students to respond and to prevent skipping. We'll talk about what we can do with the link here in just a little bit as we transition to understanding how we can create choice boards using Nearpod, as well as utilizing Google and Microsoft. However, before we do that, I would like to give you some time to practice and play. If you're curious as to how to create that preview link, I would like to show you that when you are hovering over any lesson in Nearpod, you'll see that there is a preview button in the lower right corner. When selected, how you can find that preview link is by selecting the 3 horizontal dots. And notice that this will reveal the option to choose a preview link. And remember that this will provide unlimited access to that resource, but it will not collect data. It's very important that I mention that in the event that you would like to receive data either in real time or in your Nearpod reports. Allow me to go ahead and give you that opportunity to practice the different skills that you see here on screen. Remember that should you have any questions go ahead and post them to the Q&A field, and we would be more than happy to assist you. In the meantime, let's practice so that we can get ready to build those choice boards in Nearpod, as well as Google and Microsoft. For those of you that are still working and right now practicing the different skills, remember we're getting ready to add those different lessons to a choice board. Remember that if you're just out joining us, hello and welcome. My name is Phil Wagner, and I'm a state consultant on the customer education team here at Renaissance. If you would like to join the fun and participate in today's learning experience, go ahead and click on the link that's going to be provided to you. I did see that there were some questions popping in regarding, of course, the template. Remember, any questions that you have, let's go ahead and direct those towards the Q&A field here within Zoom. In response to your question about choice board templates, if my memory serves me correct, I don't believe that we have templates specific for choice boards. However, we do have several templates within the Nearpod library, some of which include the Freyer model, as well as a mind map, if you will. So there's lots of different templates. I just don't believe that one is the choice board. However, go ahead and toss that question into the Q&A field, and if we do, we will absolutely get you that link. For those of you that have visual access to my screen, you may have noticed that the timer has expired. I would like to encourage everyone to return back to my shared screen here in Zoom so that we can learn how to take those student-paced links and bring them into Nearpod in order to make them accessible to our students. As you return back to my shared screen here in Zoom, I wanted to now take that next step with you. And now that we know how to duplicate and make modifications and prepare those resources for those differentiated learning pathways, how do we make them accessible to students? That's precisely where I want to go next. As we continue our learning journey, I wanted to spend some time talking about how we can take those resources that we have customized or modified for our students and first bring them into Nearpod slides. Now remember that a Nearpod slide is our content feature located right here in Nearpod. What you might not know is that when you're utilizing the text feature for the Nearpod slides, it gives you access to a hyperlink. And with this hyperlink, you'll be able to insert those student-paced links in order to make your differentiated resources, whether it's a single activity or it's an entire lesson, accessible to your students. Before I show you how to do it, I wanted to give you that opportunity to experience it. If you take a moment to toggle over to your student tab or window, you'll see waiting for you is an example of a Nearpod slide that has been modified and turned into a choice board. Feel free to go ahead and click on any or all of the different choices that are available to you. But what I want you to notice is when you click on the hypertext that it takes you to a new Nearpod location. Let me pause here for the next minute, giving you that opportunity to explore before I show you how to build the very same experience. Now that you've had the opportunity to explore a sample choice board that can be made within Nearpod utilizing the Nearpod slides, I'd like to demonstrate for you how to create a similar experience. I am going to hold right here as I would like to provide you with a live demonstration of that particular skill. As I navigate over to my teacher account, and if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to make my way to my teacher homepage by clicking on the Nearpod logo and brand in the upper left corner of my screen. Now, in today's experience, I'm going to create a brand new lesson. And to do that, I'm going to click the option that says Launch the Lesson Builder, which is located in the blue banner at the very top of our teacher homepage. As I click Launch the Lesson Builder, we're going to create from scratch. Keep in mind that we might decide to upload our resources, and a little bit later, we'll also talk about how we can utilize that Google Slide add-on to create different choice boards utilizing Google and ultimately PowerPoint as well. But in the meantime, we're going to create a lesson from scratch. You'll see that when you make that selection, we're going to have a series of different options. Now, in other sessions that we have here at Camp Engage, we do talk about how we can utilize the pre-made activities and upload our own resources. But since we're creating a choice board from scratch, I'm going to choose to create a blank slide. You'll notice that to create a blank slide in the activity picker is near the top. There is a long rectangular shape that reads add a blank slide. When selected, this provides me the opportunity then to create the choice board that I'm wanting to design for my students. Now, remember that we have some options when creating a choice board. Near the top center, we could choose to add different images. We could also upload or change the background, add video or audio. Here I would like to demonstrate just by saying that this is lesson 1. You'll notice that wherever we have text, if we highlight that text and make our way to the top center, you will see the 3 horizontal dots. When selected, this now gives you the ability to choose the hyperlink icon. You'll notice that this is located near the center of the rich text editor. When selected, it's now asking, well, what's the URL that you want to put in? Remember earlier, we talked about how you have the ability to copy a student paste link? Well, this is where we're going to put it. So I'm going to leave my window here for just a moment, and I'm going to make my way right back to Nearpod by typing in that web address, nearpod.com. Next is I'm going to find that resource that I would like to insert into my choice board. Now I'm going to pretend that this is the resource I would like to insert. Remember, we're going to choose Teach and Student Paste. Next, just like we talked about before, is make sure that you set the range at which you would like your students to have access. Again, whether it's one single day or 365. Make sure that you hit to not skip. And when you're ready, click to copy link. Once you've copied the link, we're going to make our way right back to the lesson builder. And we're then going to insert or copy and paste the lesson code or the link. When you click save, you'll notice that that particular text will then be accessible and clickable to your students when live. And remember, just like the experience that we just had a moment ago, is when the students click on the link, it will then take them to the differentiated pathway or the tiered pathway that we have planned for them, whether it's a single activity, a mini lesson, or an entire lesson. As I return back to the main presentation, I wanted to give you an opportunity to try. Let's go ahead and practice. Remember, let's make our way to creating a brand new slide in Nearpod. Use a text box that's already available to us, or you can create a brand new text box. Don't forget to highlight that text and click the 3 horizontal dots, ultimately selecting the hyperlink to insert that student paste link. Remember that should you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to post them in the Q&A chat field. However, let me give you about 2 minutes to break off and practice this particular skill before we continue in showing how we can also use Google and Microsoft to create choice boards or hyperdocs and bring them into Nearpod as well. For those of you that have visual access to my screen, you may have noticed that the timer has expired. I would like to encourage you to come on back to my screen so that we can learn how to utilize Google as well as Microsoft to help build our choice boards. As you return back to my shared screen, it's very possible that you might want to build choice boards or hyperdocs utilizing Google or Microsoft. And I wanted to share with you, how is that possible? Well, what's great is we're going to utilize similar strategies. So we're still going to have to use either a preview link or we're going to have to use that student paste link, but we're just going to bring it to the Google slide, or we're going to bring it to PowerPoint and then ultimately bring it into Nearpod. Let me show you how we can do this. First and foremost, I just wanted to share that we absolutely can utilize resources that we may already have built. Again, you might already have hyperdocs and Google Slides that already have those web resources, but how do we bring them in? How do we turn them into choice boards? What are some quick tips and tricks? And that's what I want to discuss with you first. Now you'll see here that if you toggle over to your student participation tab or window, we're going to talk about Google first. If you would be so kind, let's go ahead and toggle over to your student participation tab or window, and you'll see waiting for you is a sample Google slide that I've turned into a hyperdoc. Let's go ahead and click back to our student participation tab or window, and let's explore on our own. Soon after, I will show you how to build the very same experience. As you're clicking on the different resources and exploring on your own, remember that should you have any questions whatsoever, to go ahead and post them to the Q&A field, where we'd be more than happy to answer any and all questions that you have. As you see, and return back to my shared screen, you may have noticed that in a similar fashion, when we're using the Google Slides, hyperlinks, is the images are now clickable within Google Slides. And I wanted to share with you, how is this possible? How is this built? Well, I wanted to mention that there are some really easy steps that we can follow. So first and foremost is that we just need to create a Google Slide. And we can either use hypertext, which we're used to doing and creating within Google, or we can select an image and insert that student paste link directly on the image. Now, here's where things get interesting, is that how we can bring it into Nearpod is that we have to adjust the URL. You'll notice that in a moment, I'm going to show you where we can find the edit portion of the link. We're going to delete all that, and we're going to add the word preview. Now there's a reason why we're going to do that, is because when we added a preview, what's going to open in Nearpod is that single hyperdoc slide, which is exactly what we want students to have access to. Now, how do we bring it in? We bring it in using web content. What I would like to do is to provide you with a very quick demonstration of how do you build this within Google Slides. You'll notice that as I very quickly make my way to a blank Google Slide presentation, I wanted to share with you whether we decide to use text that is clickable for our students, or if we decide to use an image. Remember that if we highlight that particular text, we can insert a hyperlink within Google, and remember that the link that we're going to use, that we're going to overlay the text or the image, is going to be that student paste code for the lesson or activity or preview link. Remember that once you click apply, and once this is made available within Nearpod, the text will be clickable or image will be clickable. Earlier, I had mentioned that we do need to modify the URL in order to bring it into Nearpod. If you draw your attention to the very top of my screen, and I know it's a little hard to see, but you'll notice that at the end of my URL, you'll see there's a backslash with the word edit. If we find this location, we can delete up to that backslash, and we can write the word preview. Next, we're going to want to highlight that particular URL, and we're going to copy it. Of course, the quick keys would be Control-C, or if you're using Apple, it would be Command-C to copy that link. Next, when we return back to our Nearpod lesson, how we get that link into Nearpod is by inserting it as web content. Where we can find that is by clicking Add New, which is going to bring up the picker. Remember that web content is indeed a media feature, which is in that first row on the far right. When selected and added to our lesson, this gives us the power to insert that preview link that we copied from Google Slides. And if you wanted to preview, you can test that link right here. And you see here, this is the experience that I had built, where when you click on the link, it'll then take you to that virtual experience. Now, I also wanted to take a moment to share, well, what if I have PowerPoint? Can I not do something similar? And you absolutely can. but I want to suggest something a little bit different. In PowerPoint, you may have noticed that you have the ability, just like Google, to go ahead and add hypertext. So in a similar fashion, when we are building our PowerPoint slides using the desktop, once we built that single slide, we can then bring that particular slide into Nearpod. Let me show you what I'm talking about. First step is, of course, we need to build that experience. And remember that in a PowerPoint slide, we're going to go ahead and add or insert that hypertext within a single PowerPoint slide, and we're going to insert the student-paced lesson link that we want students to navigate towards, or single activity. Once that activity is built, or once that PowerPoint slide is built, we're going to go ahead and upload files. Now you'll notice here that we have some options. We can drag and drop, which is my preferred method, or you can click to upload, which means that you can search your computer for that single slide PowerPoint presentation. Now you'll notice that I'm going to minimize my screen because I would love to show you how this is done. You'll see that if you click, hold, and drag to bring in that single PowerPoint slide, like I'm demonstrating here, that already has those hyperlinks already built into it, you can bring it into Nearpod. Make sure that you choose to bring it in as a PPTX file. Let me go ahead and upload that again. You'll notice here in just a couple seconds, the PowerPoint will process and come right into Nearpod. And what I wanted to highlight is that notice that I already have a hyperlink that is already on the screen or available to my students. When this is live, you'll see that that text, just like Google, will then be accessible for me to click and take my students to different locations. For example, maybe it takes me to a Draw It, or maybe it takes me to a Collaborate board, or a lesson that we have duplicated and modify that depth of knowledge level so that it's the right fit for students in order to learn at a particular level. I did want to give you some time to practice, to play, and even try the very same technique. Remember that if we are Google users, we can go to Google and we can create that single Google slide, ultimately bringing in that hyperdoc or choice board into Nearpod utilizing web content. For PowerPoint friends, for my Microsoft friends, remember we can create a single slide within PowerPoint found on our desktop. Make sure that you hyperlink the text utilizing that preview or student paste link, just like we did with the Nearpod slide. And then you can drag and drop that single slide into Nearpod, creating that very same hyperdoc or choice board experience. Let me give you some time to practice that very same skill. Remember that should you have any questions whatsoever, I want to encourage you to go ahead and post them to the question and answer field, and we'd be more than happy to assist you. However, in the meantime, let me give you some time to practice, to play, and explore. Soon after, we'll wrap up today's session and talk about next steps. We did have a great question that came in from one of our friends asking, so if we make changes to that Google Slide preview, will it actually change within the Nearpod? So since it is a preview, it absolutely will. That's actually one of the tricks that I use all the time is I'll insert that preview link, change the hyperdoc within Google Drive, and then ultimately everything will upload the way that it should in the lesson. However, unfortunately with PowerPoint, it doesn't quite work the same way. I saw there was another great question that popped in asking about other third-party resources. So remember that you absolutely can. So let's say I know the example was asking about Canva, and I know there's several other presentation softwares that are out there. If you bring it in as web content, absolutely, no problem. In fact, I've had teachers in the past that have built different infographics, for example, and have saved it within that third-party resource, brought it in through web content. You absolutely can. So great question, by the way, coming in from Aruba, and that is your response. For those of you that are still practicing, utilizing either Google or Microsoft to bring in a hyperdoc, we have about 30 seconds before we continue. Again, about 30 seconds before we continue. Excellent. So for those of you that might have your eyes on my screen, you may have noticed that the timer has expired. I did see that there were some questions in the Q&A chat field, so I will try to balance between wrapping up the session and answering those questions to help you here live in the conversation. So hang tight if you've been waiting for some of those responses to be answered, as I will work on that here very shortly. However, as you transition back to my shared screen here in Zoom, I would like to now wrap up our conversation for today. And to do so, I would like to take you to a Collaborate board where we're going to have an opportunity to share our learning. You'll see in just a moment, you'll have an opportunity to not only share your takeaway from today's session, but also share your next step on utilizing or creating choice boards to help support the student learning experience for your students. And then lastly, share one thing you wonder about. What are still some questions that you might still have? Remember to answer or respond to each column. There is an ascending arrow along the right side. When you select the different titles, notice that it will highlight each column, allowing you to post directly to that particular column. Let me hold here for maybe a good solid minute or two. Remember that as we're wrapping up the session, there is a feedback form that is going to be posted within the Zoom chat field. As you are filling out the Collaborate board and filling out the feedback form, I do want to thank everyone for your kind participation. Remember that I will be sticking around to answer those questions, so hang tight as we wrap up the session. I'd be more than happy to answer those questions for you. However, as we're wrapping up our time here today, I look forward to learning how we can utilize choice boards within learning. And remember that what is a choice board? So a choice board provides our students with different choices on how they can engage in learning. Now, what that might look like in Nearpod is that might just be a single activity that they choose to use, or it could be an entire lesson or mini lesson. So remember, that's what a choice board is. It's giving our students options to access educational content. So there's also some additional questions about, well, when might you use this in the classroom? Well, for me, I might decide to use this maybe for a station rotation. For example, when we are positioning those learning opportunities in the room, we might also have, let's say, a project. Maybe we're having students put together their own learning artifact, and maybe that choice board is including different learning options. Maybe at the beginning of that project, they can source a Nearpod lesson to collect information. Maybe they can engage in the different Nearpod activities. Maybe we also include other third-party resources that have been vetted and trusted by our school or district, or ones that we've come to love and know. There's lots of great learning opportunities that we can use choice boards for, and we can create those seamless access to content right here within Nearpod. As I see, we're just about at time. And again, I want to thank everyone for your kind participation. I did want to end our time. I see just one comment and really focusing on differentiation. Remember that we started with the skill to duplicate, to differentiate. So remember that when we are differentiating, oftentimes it comes down to that depth of knowledge question that we're asking. And there might be students that might need a DOK level 1, level 2, or level 3. But how do you create those learning pathways? That's precisely where we can duplicate a lesson. And within those activities, we can then create that tiered learning experience so that we can support all learners within our classroom. And remember, that's exactly how we can duplicate and certainly create choice boards in order to provide those learning opportunities for all. As we are wrapping up our time here today, I hope that everyone had a great time learning about how to create choice boards and bringing them into Nearpod. I hope that you continue to have a great day of learning at Camp Engage, and I look forward to seeing how you utilize choice boards in order to support your students this year. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.